in about a minute or so. So thank you all for your patience.
Put it over there.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's go ahead and jump right in. So thank you all. If you are just now tuning in, my name is Tatiana Santos, and I am the Youth Program Manager with African Library Project. Thank you all for joining us for our first ever Art of Storytelling live event. As we come to the end of Together We Read, we are truly grateful to be able to celebrate with all of you through stories and continuing to encourage youth reading. As of today, we have been able to raise $8,000. And so we really just want to thank all of you again and let you know that we truly appreciate all of you that have helped make this possible. Before we begin, again, I ask that everyone please keep your audio and video turned off so we can respect the stories of our authors today. And we'll go ahead and dive right in. We are very excited to have two award-winning author-illustrator duos with us this afternoon, Henkes and Laura Dronzek, as well as Victoria Jameson and Omar Mohamed. These talented creators, they will be sharing some of their work with us this afternoon, and we'll also take some time to answer some questions that you may have. So please feel free to utilize the chat, and yeah, we'll try to get to your question throughout the event. With that being said, I would like to turn it over to Kevin and Laura as they share Kevin's soon to be released book, Sunflower Lion, in addition to their most recently published book, Summer Song. Kevin and Laura, thank you again so much for joining us today. At this time, I'd like to turn it over to both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're very happy to be here. I'm Kevin.
And I'm Laura.
And what we're going to do today first is read our book, Summer Song. It is my 56th book, and it is our 6th collaboration. So I write and illustrate picture books. I write and illustrate books for beginning readers. I write novels, and I also write picture books that someone else illustrates, and this is one of those books. This is our newest. So I will read the words, and Laura will show the pictures.
Show the pictures.
You're gonna use,
yeah, I'll use this one. Are you doing that in sheets?
Sure.
Okay. All right.
These are the end sheets of the book, which again, because these books are for often kids who aren't readers yet, kids can read pictures. And so looking at things like the end sheets is really important. So this is the book. The summer sun.
Whoops. Just a second. Okay.
The summer sun is a giant flower, and the flowers are like little suns of all different colors. But if I had to pick one color, I'd say summer is green. Green on green on green. Summer is a green song. A song of leaves and trees and weeds and grass. If there is tall grass in a field and the wind blows, it sounds like music. So do the air conditioners and the fans and the sprinklers and the lawnmowers. Most of the time, birds are part of the song, in the air, of the sky, and sometimes rain and thunder are too. If you lie in the grass and you're quiet and patient and lucky, you might hear a bug song, whirring and buzzing and humming. Are there bees? Yes. Grasshoppers? Yes. Crickets? Yes. Dragonflies? Yes. And silent butterflies too.
Mm-hmm.
And at night, are there butterflies?
Yeah, I just
Sometimes
logging on.
there's
It's a little.
and
Right now
another,
they're doing kind of a picture
and
book.
another one singing to each other without a sound. When there is fog early in the morning, summer is a gray song. When you go to the beach or a lake, summer is a blue song. And when the sky is blue too. But the green song is still there. If you slow down and think about it, you can feel the summer song. It's warm, and then hot, and then hotter. In the shade, it can be cool, or when you play with the hose. But when the days become shorter and the nights come earlier, the song changes. Summer gets bored and wants to try something new, something different. The song is turning, turning, turning. It's turning into fall.
The end.
The end. So that's our newest book. And now Laura will help me, and I'll give you a sneak preview at my next book, which will be coming out in September. And this is a picture book that I illustrated called Sunflower Lion. And I'll read it again, and Laura will show the picture. So this is the jacket, and these are the end sheets. Do I do the end sheets? Or will you do it?
I can do that. Sorry, before our screen was so small, I couldn't really, everything's reversed, so I'm having trouble making sure you can see it.
Those are the
There we
end
go.
sheets. Title page. Title page.
Everything's completely reversed.
There's the title
Okay, there we go.
page. And now we'll begin. Chapter 1. Chapter 1.
Oh. Chapter 1, if I can turn the page. All right, here we go.
This is the sun. Can you see it? The sun is in the sky. It is shining. It is as bright as a flower. Chapter 2.
Just a second. Right.
Chapter 2. This is a flower. Can you see it? The flower is growing. It is growing on the hill. It looks like a little lion.
Why is it so?
Chapter 3. This is a lion. Can you see him? The lion is running up the hill. He smells the flower. He warms himself in the sun. Chapter 4. The lion sleeps. He dreams he is in a field of flowers. The flowers are as big as the sun. The flowers are cookies. The lion eats them all. When he wakes up, he is hungry. Chapter 5. The lion runs home. Can you see him? No, you can't. He is running too fast. Chapter 6. Now the lion is home. He has had his supper and he is asleep with his family. He is happy. Can you see him? Yes, you can. The end. The end.
I hope you can see that.
So that's Sunflower Line.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. That was beautiful. Both stories and the images, just really everything. Very inspiring. I would like to ask you both a few quick questions. What kinds of things do you think about when writing and illustrating a book for a young child?
Do you want to go first? Or do you want-
Sure. When I'm illustrating, I get the words, and so then I have to think about how I'm going to structure the book and split up the text so that kids can turn the pages and be looking for something. And so I can go in a million different directions when I first get the text. As in Summer Song, there was nothing about the kids really, or the dog or the cat that are in the pictures. And so I try to make a subtext that will give kids and parents something else to look at while they're going through the book, and so that it makes it interesting for them to keep going through the book over and over again.
And I think with that point, a lot of kids who are listening to a picture book aren't readers yet, but they can read pictures. And so I think it's really important, and I love what Laura has done, for example, with the dog in Summer Song, because you can follow the dog throughout the book. And a child, even if they can't read words, they can read pictures. And so I think that's important. One thing that I think about when I'm writing a picture book that's going to be read aloud again and again and again, hopefully, is the rhythm of the words. I want the rhythm of the words to draw the reader in, to draw the listener in. I think E.B. White referred to it as the sound words make on paper. And words really do obviously have sounds, but the way you arrange them makes a difference. And if it's going to be read aloud, it's nice to have a good rhythm. When I'm working on a book for a young listener, I think about ways in which the child can participate. And so, for example, in Summer Song, there's the part about the fireflies. There's one and another one and another one. And when I wrote it, I imagined the child listener perhaps pointing to the illustration. It's a way to participate. I think one thing that I try to keep in mind is, as an adult, there are things that might seem familiar to me, but to a child, they're not. And I think that's important to keep in mind. I had my first editor once said something like, if you're writing a book, you don't have to write about a purple cow because a child maybe has never seen a regular cow. And I think that's important to keep in mind, keeping the child in mind, keeping the child experiences in mind. Of course, one wants to expand one's imagination and, all of those things, but really remembering what a child likes, what they, what resonates with them, I think is important.
I completely love everything about that response. It seems that your work really gives children an opportunity, like you said, to participate and to engage and to really discover the story for themselves, and to maybe have that discovery be something different every time. So I think that's really amazing. Another question that I have for both of you, in your opinion, what are some of the benefits of reading books to a child?
Well, I think there's so many. I think one thing is the connection that you get with your child and that your child gets with you. And so when you're sitting with a child, whether they're in your lap or sitting next to you, just having that time where there's nothing else distracting you and you're looking at something and engaged together, I think it's a great time, for a child to get comfort and to feel connected to someone. And even if you're just looking at the pictures in a book, you can talk about what you see, and like having the end sheets. I often think that's a nice time when someone's reading with their child to look at that and say, oh, look, what is that? And what is that? And so it's a time to really have that connection. I think that's one of the main things.
I think another benefit, I think it's important for child readers or listeners to see themselves reflected in books. I think that gives someone a sense of self-esteem. It lets one, I think, feel a sense of belonging, like there's another person who's like me. And likewise, I think it's great for a book to be about other people. And I think if you see others reflected in books, then I think you learn empathy. I think, the obvious thing that benefits of a book is you increase, I think, the child's vocabulary. I think it just is a natural thing that will happen. And I think another thing that's really interesting is so many picture books or storybooks have a certain problem, and often the problem is solved. And I think if someone has a steady exposure, a regular exposure to books, they see that. And so I hope that in everyday life, when someone is, maybe a child is experiencing a certain problem, they know that problems can be solved. And I think that's an important thing. I think that's something I hadn't thought about books when I first began making them, but I think it really is important.
Right.
And I think it can be a great way to work through things in a certain way.
I think it's also a way of creating a lifelong reader. I mean, I think when you start reading to kids when they're really little, they have positive associations with books and with words and with learning. And I think it just really expands a child's mind and leaves them open to learning all kinds of other things. And then they will always have books as a resource and as a source of comfort.
Yes, absolutely. One thing that really stuck out to me when the two of you were speaking just a moment ago was the word connection, and saying, that reading has this power to build connection. And to the points that both of you made through these stories, it's, you're able to have these young minds learn connection not only to themselves and to their families, but also larger scale, the world around them, and gain all of these skills and abilities and develop this love for learning at a young age. That's amazing. Another question that I have is about, I've noticed that a lot of your characters seem to be mice. And why is this the case?
I didn't set out to do that. The first 4 books that I did, the characters were humans, fairly realistically rendered. And what happened is that my texts, my stories started to become more humorous. And I thought I could better tap the humor in my stories if I used animals and drew them more freely. When the first book I did that in was A Weekend with Wendell, and I did mice, and I had a good time doing it. So the next book I wrote was called Sheila Ray the Brave. And when I wrote it, I thought of them as humans, but I thought I would do animals again. And since I had such a good time doing A Weekend with Wendell, I just used mice again, and then I just continued to do it. It was not anything I set out to do. It was not anything that was planned. It just happened organically.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think sometimes that's the best way for things to happen. Going off of that, do you have a favorite book out of all of the books that you've written?
Oh, for me, I would say it's always the next one. I always, the one that I'm, just starting to work on or working on, I always think it will be perfect. They never are. But I think thinking that next one is going to be the best one keeps me going. Do you have a favorite?
Yeah, I love the one I'm working on now. I'm working on another book that Kevin wrote called Little Houses, and it's a beach story. And that's been wonderful. And I often love the next book. I have to say I love doing all the season books because I love nature. And so it was wonderful to have this, experience of being able to focus completely on a season. So each one of those was just a joy to do.
That's amazing. At this time, I think I'm going to turn it over to the chat and see what questions some of our participants have asked. If you haven't asked a question yet, but something comes to mind, feel free to put that in the chat now. Let's see, we have a question. What is the hardest part of creating a book? Is it illustrating, the story, the words, or something else?
I would say for me, the hardest part is always getting the initial idea. What usually happens is if I'm working on a book and if I don't have an idea for the next book, I really slow down and I go as slowly as possible because I always like to have an idea for the next one before I finish the one that I'm working on.
Mhm.
So for me, that's the hardest part. Once I have an idea and I feel comfortable and good about the idea, I always feel that I can work the other parts out. Not that it will be easy, and sometimes it's not easy at all. And I have found that if I'm working on a picture book and I've had a hard time doing a particular illustration, I think, oh, I wish I were doing a novel with no pictures because that's so much easier. And then when I'm working on a novel and I get stuck, I often think, oh, it'd be so much more fun if I were doing a picture book because then I could just sit and draw, which is much more enjoyable than writing. So it goes back and forth. But for me, I think the hardest part is the idea, getting a good, solid idea.
Getting a good
And I think in illustrating, I think the hardest part when I first get the words and, I can go in a million different directions. Sometimes it just stops me in my tracks and I think, oh my gosh, I'm never going to be able to figure out where I'm going to go with this. And
Yes.
yeah, and usually, I'll sit on a book and just keep reading the text over and over for sometimes it's a couple months. And eventually it just starts to take a direction and images start to come out in my head. And then I think, okay, now I'm going to go this way. And then I can feel sort of a little bit of relief. But always in the beginning, I think, oh, I don't know, where am I going to go with this?
And along those lines, the brilliant author, illustrator, M.B. Goffstein said once, there is one way for your book to look. It is your duty to find it. And I think that's really true. I think in the beginning, it really is an open field. And once you start narrowing down, then there's so many choices to make. What is the shape of the book? What is the size of the book? And all of it underscores what the book is about. And so then you have to choose, what will the type look like? What will I use to make the illustrations? Will it be full color? Will it be like Sunflower Lion, just black and yellow? I mean, all those things come together, I think, to make a good book. And when a book is done, I often look at them, I mean, not even my own, but other people's, and I just think, oh my gosh, that's the way, I'm sure they had that idea in their head from the very beginning. And knowing what I know from seeing the other, and I'm sure that's not true because there are so many
process.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow, yeah, that's very interesting. The idea stage and having so many different directions to go with that. Okay, and let's go to the chat again. Okay, how did you get started as a picture book writer?
I was really lucky. I always wanted to be an artist, so I grew up thinking of myself as an artist. When I was a junior in high school, I really began to like writing a lot. And I had a teacher who encouraged my writing and went so far as to say I wouldn't be surprised if I saw a book with your name on it one day, which was huge, shows the power of a teacher. And I decided that children's picture books would be the perfect job for me because I could write and I could paint and draw in the same art form. So when I was 19 years old, the summer between my freshman and sophomore years of college, I went from my home in Wisconsin to New York City for a week to look for a publisher. And I was so lucky and fortunate that Susan Hirschman at Green Willow Books, publisher of Green Willow Books, offered me a contract for my first book. And that was 40 years ago this month. And I've been with Green Willow, one publisher, all these years.
Yeah, that is amazing. Both that you found a publisher that you've been able to stay with, and that you've been able to find this beautiful way of combining both of your loves, and your passions. Let's see, another question here. What do your own kids think about having author illustrator parents?
I think when they were younger, they didn't really think about it. It was just mom and dad go upstairs and work. I think in some ways when they got older, it's been a little bit of a curse because now, they're both, one is 25 and one is 22, and they both just graduated from respective programs. And given these times, it's very difficult. And, looking for a job and trying to figure out how you're going to live your life is hard. And I think they think, oh, I wish I could do what you're doing. And both of them are in totally unrelated fields. And so I think it's been an interesting.
Yeah. And I think when they were little, they really did just take it for granted. And they thought, that's what you do when you're an adult. You just draw pictures and make up stories. It just seemed like a very, I mean, to them, it was just what adults do.
I think they wish, that everyone could do that. And we feel so lucky that we can do it. And, I think, so it's a good thing, but it's also, I think, hard to grow up that way and realize that not everybody gets to do that.
But that's amazing that they got to see that side of life and see possibilities and that you can live your dreams. So what were some of your favorite books as children?
I loved Virginia Lee Burton's Little House. That's I'm doing the right name, right?
Yeah, the Little House.
Yeah,
the Little House.
And we went to the library and we had a child's book of verses, which I read over and over and looked at the illustrations all the time. So the books that we had, I really spent a lot of time looking at the illustrations, and we've got a lot of books in our house, and you have tons of favorites.
And when I was a boy, my very favorite book was a book called Is This You? By Ruth Krauss with pictures by Crockett Johnson. And they are the husband and wife team who illustrated The Carrot Seed. And the thing about Is This You that is so wonderful, and I still have my copy from when I was a kid, is that it's essentially a guide for making a book. The narrator of the book says, is this where you live? And there might be a picture of a bird bath. Is this where you live? And there's a picture of a store. And then it says, take a piece of paper and draw a picture of where you live. And then it does the same thing where, is this your family? Is this what you like to eat? Is this where you sleep? And then at the end, the narrator informs the reader how to put the pages together, and you have a book about you. And I loved it. And I think it's so interesting that I grew up to make books, and that was really my favorite book. I loved another book called Rain Makes Applesauce by Julian Shear with pictures by Marvin Bielek. Another favorite was Harry the Dirty Dog. I loved Where the Wild Things Are, was very big in my life when I was a kid.
And Mr. Rabbit and the Lovely Present. That was another.
Yeah. And again, in my house, growing up, we didn't have a lot of books, but we went to the library regularly. Going to the public library was just what one did. And so that was my real exposure to books. And books, I think, really fed my soul, and I loved them and couldn't get enough of them.
Again,
so I'm a proponent of libraries.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. That's amazing that you, even though you didn't have books necessarily in the home, you still were able to access them another way and then fuel this inspiration that you had. Another question from the chat. The flower used in Sunflower Lion, was there a particular reason why you chose that flower?
Well, the book began, I wanted to write a really young book. And I had the idea where it might be fun to have some visual image that looked very much the same, and to have it represent 2 or 3 or 4 different things. And when I was just doodling, one of my original doodles was a pear that looked like a whale that I don't remember, maybe I didn't come up with something else. And I had a triangular shape that could be a sail, it could be a hat, a sail on a sailboat. And one day I just doodled this and it looked like the sun, and I thought, oh, that could be a lion. And I thought, well, it looks like a flower. And so it just began sort of by doodling, but the intent was to have something that could represent more than one thing, that was very, very, very simple. So that I imagined a caregiver or a parent looking at these pictures and even, running their finger around the scalloped edges and saying, can you see that shape someplace else on this page? So it began sort of with a puzzle for myself to try to come up with something that could represent more than one thing.
I love that idea of having one thing, but then you're able to use your perspective to see it in different ways. And I think that's an important skill to teach our youth as well, is looking at things from different perspectives. And I think it's beautiful that you are able to do it that way through your writing and through your illustration. I think this will be our last question. What is something parents should keep in mind when starting to read to their children for the first time?
I think the one thing that people should keep in mind is to really just keep talking. It doesn't have to be you sit down and you read through the whole book. You can really take your time, look at the cover, ask questions. If you're looking at the end sheets, say, oh, do you see a flower? Do you see a bee? I'm thinking about the end sheets here. What's that? And really try to make it an interactive experience. And there's no right or wrong way to do it.
Yeah, I think that's important.
I think the main thing is just sharing that time with your child and just asking them questions. And when they have questions or want to stop and really look at something, like take the time to let them do that. Just, go slowly and just let it evolve.
No, I think that's really important. I think the main thing is the time that you're sharing together. And there are so many ways to read a book. You could take a picture book or a storybook with a child who can't read at all and just go through and look at the pictures. And there's so much to talk about. And even with a book like this, I mean, just with just the cover, I mean, one could say, oh, summer song, what are some other seasons? And you could start talking about other seasons, or you could say, what do you like about summer? And so you can have this great bonding time, this great connection with a child. I mean, just by using this book as a springboard. And then, of course, there is the story and there's everything, but there is no right way. I think it's just a beautiful tool with which to build a bond, build a connection, learn language, all of those things. But there is no one real right way to do it. And one should always trust one's instincts, I think, and follow your child and take it from there.
I think the two of you said that wonderfully. I love that your books encourage youth to think and that there is no wrong way and to be curious. And I think that's absolutely wonderful to be instilling that in the minds of children. So thank you for the work that you do and for joining us today. Thank you everyone that put a question in the chat. And I think now we'll get ready to turn it over to Victoria, Jameson, and Omar Mohamed. Thank you again, Laura and Kevin. It was so nice.
You're welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. And in just a moment now, we will be hearing from, as I mentioned, Victoria, Jamieson, and Omar Mohamed as they share their recently published work, When Stars Are Scattered. So in just a moment, they will be joining us. And perfect timing. Hi, Victoria. Hi, Omar.
Hi.
All right. Thank you guys for being here. And I will go ahead and turn it over to the two of you.
Great. Well, thank you so much for having us. And that was a real joy to listen to Kevin and Laura speak. Kitten's First Full Moon is one of the favorites in our house. So that was a real pleasure. So Omar and I are going to talk about our book, When Stars Are Scattered. And the way we usually do it is Omar gives a little talk first about his life and what it's like to grow up in a refugee camp. And then I'll talk about how we made the graphic novel together. So Omar, do you want to start us off?
Yeah. Hi, everyone. My name is Omar Mohamed. I'm the co-author of When Stars Are Scattered. The book is solely based on me, Omar, and my younger brother Hassan, leaving our home country and then growing up in a refugee camp in Kenya. The book, for me, I was born in Somalia. At age 4, there was a war in my country. So most of the people has to flee because of their safety. And then we become a refugee in Kenya. Kenya is in neighboring country to Somalia. And that's why if you Google the word refugee, you will find a refugee is anyone who is seeking a refuge for his safety, fear of persecution based off his race, his ethnicity, or even his beliefs. So for us, because of the civil war that had impacted on my family, we have to flee and grow up in a refugee camp. In Kenya, we were welcomed by United Nations because they opened a refugee camp in Kenya. In the refugee camp, in the beginning, it was supposed to be a home for 10,000, but over 100,000 refugees showed up. That made everything scarred or limited. You know, they were in the refugee camp. There was not enough food. There's not enough water. There's not enough medicine. There's not enough houses. There's not enough clothes. Everything is limited. Everything was limited. So I spent over 17 years in that refugee camp. I went to elementary and middle school and high school in that refugee camp. In the early years, the space were also very limited. For example, in the whole refugee camp, there was only one high school and few middle schools and few also elementary schools. So in the refugee camp, my brother also Hassan he has intellectual disabilities, and he also has seizures and also other medical conditions that will need some doctors need. But there was no doctors in the refugee camp too, because of it's a refugee camp. And for me, when we came to the refugee camp, we get separated from my mom. My dad became the victim in that war. So it's only me, 4-year-old, my younger brother, 2 years old, in a refugee camp by ourselves. So in the refugee camp, we were raised, adopted by a foster mom, actually unofficial adoption with the help of UNHCR. We were adopted by our foster mom, Fatuma, who lost also everything. She lost, the war actually had a huge impact on her family. And then in the refugee camp, with kids growing up as a child, as I said, there was not enough food. You eat once a day, if you're very lucky. You wear one long shirt that goes up to your knees. Don't even mention shoes. Books, I write like one notebook with 6 subjects. And that is because I have nothing. One pen, you may have that pen for over 2-3 months, because if it gets lost, there's no way you can get a new pen soon because you don't have any money. Toys, even don't mention, they are not on our vocabulary too. We have there's nothing, although we had our own soccer balls that make up of plastic bags. Also, we play with bricks, make of sand, and also we make our own toys that we make like animal toys out of the mud. For the schooling, actually, it was hard and it was difficult because when you go to elementary school, it's okay. The classes are overcrowded. Maybe one classroom that's supposed to be 40 students may be a class for 200 students. The kids will sit on the floor, and don't mention even computer or toys or even textbooks. It's all we get was notebooks. That's 1 or 2 notebooks. And in high school, then at my time, we were like 800 students, and they only had a space for 150 students. So the competition is tough. There's no electricity in the refugee camp. There's no electricity. The water is limited. The water is limited. Everything was also very, very scarce. So what we did was everybody was there struggling for their own. Everybody was struggling for their own, and we were part of those people who were struggling at that time. So in the refugee camp, there's only 3 options that's only available to you in the refugee camp. 1, to be resettled. 2, to go back to your country if your country is safe. 3, to stay in that refugee camp. Staying because there's nothing for the adults. There's no employment. There's nothing going on. everything is the same. We call it open prison. For example, you wake up in the morning, clean your tent, fetch water, cook the little food you have, then stay home for nothing. Everything is the same. There are even kids that were born in that refugee camp now have their own kids. Even after high school, there's no further education. There's not even any type of employment that was available to the adults. You only depend on those food distribution that's done by those refugees, and the food distribution is done once a month, or sometimes it used to be done every 15 days. So that's all you depend on is that food distribution. For me, I was very lucky that I was considered for the resettlement process. The resettlement process also takes a long process. It takes about maximum it takes about 7 years for you to be approved, because you have to be screened, pre-screened, and then interviewed, pre-interviewed. You also have to do some medical checkups, all that stuff you have to do. And then finally, I came to America in 2009. And then after 1 year, I worked as a Western La Paloma pool attendant, went to college, University of Arizona in Tucson, Arizona, did my bachelor's degree, and then graduated in May in 2014. The same year, I also became a US citizen. The next year, I also started working as a resettlement case manager at Church World Service, where I work as a case manager, where I welcome newly arrived refugees to the United States. I provide orientation to them. I help them get housing, get all the documents, the school enrollments. So it's not easy job, because you have to train someone who just came to this country, who does speak majority of them English, who the culture is different, the food is everything is different. So in the US now, I live with my wife, my 5 kids, and also my brother Hassan, and he's doing very, very well. I'm doing very, very well, and also my brother and my wife are also doing very well. So I'll pass on to Vicky, and I hope you ask questions, because it's a lot to talk in 10 minutes. All right.
I saw some questions popping up already for you, Omar, so I think you'll have plenty of questions.
Yeah.
So I wanted to talk about how we sort of met and how we made the book together. So if you haven't seen the inside of it, When Stars Are Scattered is a graphic novel. So a lot of my other books are also graphic novels. So you're probably familiar with what a graphic novel is. It's kind of a long form comic book filled with color. Our colorist was named Iman Getty. She helped add the colors in the book. And I love making graphic novels because I love drawing and I love writing. And this seemed like a good book to make a graphic novel of, particularly because a lot of the scenery and a lot of the scenes, me as an American, I wasn't familiar with. Well, what do schools in a refugee camp look like? What do homes in Dadaab look like? So I didn't know what that would look like. So I thought maybe other young readers wouldn't know that either. So that's one of the reasons we decided to make it a graphic novel. So Omar and I met because I was visiting his place of work, which is called Church World Service, which, as Omar said, is a place that welcomes new refugees and new arrivals to the United States and helps find apartments and jobs and everything to kind of get them acclimated to the United States. So I was walking through, and I'd mentioned to one of his coworkers that I write graphic novels. I was thinking about making a graphic novel, and she introduced me to Omar, and she said Omar was writing his story and he was looking for a co-author. So we sort of sat down to talk about what it might look like if we thought we could work together, and so we gave it a shot. So the way we started off when we were working was, it was a different experience for me because my other books before I'd written by myself. So I had my own ideas and I just kind of sat here in my studio and just worked by myself. This one was different because it's not my story and I couldn't write it by myself. So I would usually go down to Omar's place of work, and it would be during lunch breaks or anytime he had time off. And I would just kind of take notes. He would tell me different stories and I would sit and write down notes in a notebook like this. And I would often do sketches and writing together. because sometimes I think that's why I make graphic novels, because sometimes I think in words and sometimes I think in pictures, and sometimes it's just faster for me to write things down as a picture instead of words. So I did this for a long time. I think we met for quite a few months before even attempting to write a story or put it all together. So after this, the next step in making a graphic novel was after we kind of discussed, well, which things should we put in the book? What series should it go in? The next step for me was making it into a graphic novel. So I'd make thumbnail sketches like this. So they're pretty tiny, and you probably can't tell what's going on, but that's okay. It's just kind of for me to see, well, which panels need to be bigger? Like, are there exciting scenes that need to have a big panel? Which panels need to be smaller? So that's really what I'm doing here. Another step that I do with each of my books, and this isn't for When Stars Are Scattered, this is actually for my current book, but I'll do character sketches. So I'll decide what the characters look like, what kind of clothes do they wear. This is a little sneak peek because I haven't talked about the new book yet. Something else I do, and this is for my current book as well, is I'll do floor plans or maps. So this is something we did for When Stars Are Scattered. I remember making a map together with you, Omar, where you told me where your neighborhood A2 was and where the middle school is, and just kind of how things were laid out so that I could make sure it made sense when I went to draw it. The next step is doing more drawing. If you want to make graphic novels, you need to like to draw, because I do so many drawings, so many times for each page. But that's good for me because I love to draw. It's my favorite part of making a book, is doing the drawings. The writing is very hard on my brain, but when I get to sit down and draw, then I'm happy. So then I do more complete sketches, and I start adding in the words so that we can see the art and the words together and make sure that they're really working together, that nothing's complicated. I have that problem a lot where it makes sense to me, but then when someone else reads it, they don't understand what I'm talking about. So I need to make sure it makes sense. We share this with our editor and with a lot of readers we had read this book to make sure, okay, we understand what's happening. So the final step, almost final step of making a graphic novel, is I take this messy sketch and I scribble on the back of this sheet of paper with a blue pencil, and I tape it to a sheet of paper, like a good sheet of paper. And then I take a pencil and I press down really hard, and I basically trace my drawing until it appears on this page. So you can see the light blue line that's been transferred. I do this so that I know the drawing's in the right place, but then it's light enough so I can draw on top of it and still feels fresh. So it's not like a photocopy. I can still draw it and it looks like I've just drawn it. So I go over that blue pencil with a pen and some ink, but you'll notice I don't have the words in there. I then take this drawing and I scan it into the computer, and that's when I add the words. A few other things on this page, you'll notice I drew some characters in the margin. So I try when I do my drawings to make them as complete as possible, but sometimes I make mistakes. So in this case, I made a mistake and I forgot to draw these characters in there. So I drew them on the side and then put them in Photoshop. Something else you'll notice about this is that there's no color. So that's something else I add in Photoshop. Or in this case, our colorist, Iman Getty, added the colors. So let me show you what the page looks like in the final book. So here's the final scene with the colors added. One thing, if you read the book, that you'll notice a lot of the characters are wearing brightly colored clothes with lots of patterns, like these characters here. So that's something Iman was very helpful with in adding all those patterns and making everyone look good. That was hard to keep track of too, making sure the characters were wearing the same same clothes, page after page. So side by side, you'll notice a few differences. The drawing I do on paper is a lot bigger than the book. And the reason for that is that when you read a book, the drawings are pretty small. And if I had to draw teeny tiny drawings with my little pen, I wouldn't be very happy. So I make it a little bigger so I can add details like suitcases and shoes and plants without ruining my eyes. So that's about how a page is made. This book had 254 pages. So people often ask me, like, when's your next book coming out? And I have to explain, the graphic novels take a really, 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 really long time. But I love to make them and I love to read them. So even though they take a long time, it's my favorite kind of book to make. Okay, so real quick, because I know it's almost time for Q&A, but everyone tells me this is their favorite part. I'm going to show you how I do one of my drawings because I love to draw. And I think especially if we have grown-ups watching, a lot of grown-ups tell me, oh, I wish I could draw, but I can't. And I try to tell them, everyone can draw. I use very simple shapes, even to draw something like a human person. So when I draw a human person, I'll often start with the letter U. Everyone can draw a letter U. And drawing a whole person isn't any harder than drawing just a face. For a body, I'll draw an upside down letter U. When I meet those grown-ups who tell me they can't draw, they'll often tell me, oh, I can only draw a stick figure. And I tell them, you're in luck, because that's exactly what I do. I think stick figures are a great way to start to draw your person. You can make sure it all fits, like that foot doesn't exactly fit on the page, but that's okay. So this book was interesting because I was drawing a real person. And I met Omar as a grown-up, but I didn't meet him as a kid. I didn't know what he looked like as a kid. So we kind of had to make it up. So I keep the features of anybody really simple, because then they're kind of universal and any kid can kind of plug themselves in. Then I add details like hair. And this is where, if you're a kid at home and you're making your own comic, you can personalize it and make sure the hair looks like your character, or looks like yourself, or looks like your best friend, whoever it is that you're drawing. Then I kind of go on top of that stick figure and add details like clothes, some shorts. It's not really any harder than drawing a stick figure. You just draw a second line. So one thing people always tell me they have a hard time drawing is hands. So I'm going to show you one of my top secret methods for drawing hands. It's called a mitten method. So I draw a mitten, and then inside the mitten, I draw some fingers. And then you can erase the mitten part. This is handy because it reminds you that your fingers are all different lengths and they need to form a kind of curved shape. So do it here on the other side. Now I wish I had such a simple method for drawing feet, because I kind of like drawing hands, but feet I still have a hard time with. I always forget which side the big toe goes on. There were a lot of Photoshop changes I had to make where I'd drawn the feet backwards. So I just kind of fudge it until it looks kind of like a foot, and then I call it a day. That one's off the page, so I don't need to worry about that foot. And there you go. Give it a try yourself at home. Drawing's fun. So if you have a story in mind you want to do and you think it might make a good comic book, give it a try. Try doing some drawings. Okay, so that's kind of the end of our presentation. I think we've got some time for Q&A now.
Thank you both so much. That was such a powerful story, and then seeing the creative process was really amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you create a story from real life experience?
Well, Omar, you'd already started writing your story. How was that process for you?
Mine was kind of easy in one way because it wasn't something that I was making up or creating. It was something that was real, that happened.
Mhm.
And that make it a little easier for me because I knew every little detail of what was happening and how it happened. And also, if I forget something, I always knew some former neighbors who could always reiterate or remind me if I forget anything of that sort. So it was kind of easy. If it is your story that you're writing, always easier than you're creating someone else's story or something else.
Yeah, that's very well said that you know, you're the one that lived the experience, you know the reality. And so I can see how that would make sense, that it would come very naturally to just share those pieces of your life. Omar, how did you feel when you saw Victoria's drawings telling your story?
This was as she said, I wasn't into graphic novel because for me, growing up in the refugee camp, I couldn't even tell the difference. Books were books for me. So I knew, like, because if you have different preferences, that's when you choose, oh, I like this one, I don't like this one. But we didn't have that option growing up. So for me, I always wanted to write a book, but not a graphic novel. So, but when Victoria convinced me, she always showed me, and I was always waiting, what's this gonna end up at the end? In the beginning, it was sketches, and I was like, oh, what do you get into? How is this gonna look like? And then when when the colorist added into color, it became such a beautiful, beautiful book. I was really impressed, and I hope I don't want to do anything else than graphic novel because that is the only thing I know now.
It's the only thing you know now.
Yeah.
So Omar, I know you mentioned that graphic novels, you weren't necessarily exposed to that a ton, and that you weren't really really involved in that until later on. But Victoria, what made you decide that graphic novels were your favorite type of illustrating?
Oh, well, I'd started off making picture books. So I've published a few picture books, and I've always loved picture books. And I love picture books that are very simple, kind of like what, we heard Kevin and Laura's newest books. And I just love how they say so much in so few words. And for me, that was always so hard to do. Like, I just had really long stories, and my picture books that I published had lots of words to them. And eventually I wanted to write a book about roller derby because I was playing roller derby. I was really passionate about it, but I couldn't figure out a way to make a picture book about it. So it just kind of came naturally. I read Raina Telgemeier's book, Smile, which was a graphic novel. And I thought, well, this is perfect because I could still draw pictures. I didn't have to write a whole story. I still loved telling words and pictures together. So graphic novels just seemed like a great way to tell a longer story, still where I could draw. So it seemed perfect, and I love them.
That's amazing. A quick follow-up question. What made you want to help bring Omar's story to life specifically?
Well, I think it was really meeting Omar. I mean, I had I couldn't have written the story without meeting Omar. So it's not like this book would have happened without him. I think the fact that he was willing to work with me and share his story with me that's how the book happened. That's how it was decided.
Well, it's truly great that your paths were able to cross, and the two of you were able to share this story and life experience with the world. Omar, what do you want young people to understand about refugees and their experience?
First, we always hear about refugees. I want the young people to know those are human beings like you and me. Some of them are parents, most of them are children and women. And they didn't choose to be a refugee. When you hear about refugee, you need to know you can be a refugee tomorrow, who knows? Because for me, that was the last thing I wanted, was to be a refugee. Because I was from a stable family, what you guys call here in America, a middle class family. My parents were able to provide anything that we needed. And then my parents were not envision or even myself that their children will grow up in a refugee camp. It didn't come to a single day or a single second in their mind. The same applies to you. We are talking about refugees tomorrow. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow or after tomorrow. So the two things I really want the kids to understand is those refugees are human beings. Second, they did not choose to be a refugee. The last thing that they wanted was to be a refugee. And that is not only them, but any other human being. No one wants to leave their home fleeing and going to a refugee camp. So that is one thing I really want them to know.
Mhm. Wow. Yeah, I think that's a very good point, and very powerful to realize that anyone can find themselves in that situation, and to try to look at things from that kind of lens, I think develops a lot more empathy for people. And I think that's very important. One last question for you, Omar. Have your kids read the book, and what do they think about it?
Yeah, in the beginning, Victoria met with them. I think when she came to visit me a couple of times, and they were always wondering what I was working on. But they finally get a copy. Some people that went back took some copies, and my oldest son, who's now 9 years old, and my daughter, also 7 years old, read both of them, and they had a lot of questions for me. Now I'm like, because of they have a lot of questions for me that I answered some of them I not answer yet. I told them, you are going to find out, just grow a little bit older and then you will figure it out. But they really liked it.
That's great, and it's amazing to hear that you're having that communication with your family and sharing those experiences with them as well. I think that is the last question that we have. So thank you, Omar and Victoria, again for sharing this story with us and the creative process. We're really happy to have you here.
All right, thank you very much for having us.
Yes, thank you. It was wonderful.
Great, thank you. I would like to take a quick moment now to thank everyone again for being here today in support of youth reading. All of you helped make the first year of Together We Read and Art of Storytelling possible for all of us. So we really want to let you know we appreciate our readers, our writers, donors, and everyone that was able to come together for this event. While the event is coming to a close, there's still some time to give. Donations can be made using the link in the chat, so I will go ahead and add that there for everyone. Let's see. Yes, so there is the link in the chat for all of you. We hope to see you at our future ALP events. Many thanks from all of us here at African Library Project.
Bye-bye.